Welcome to the Paperless Productivity Podcast, where we have experts give you the insights, know-how, and resources to help you transform your workplace from paper to digital, while making your work life better at the same time.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Brad Smith, your host for today's podcast. Recently, I had the pleasure of chatting with our friends Paul Embley and Diagnosing from the National Center for State Courts. During our virtual sit-down, Paul and Di tackled questions surrounding ODR. One topic, artificial intelligence, was not included in part 3 of our ODR series, as I wanted to share their conversation on AI as a bonus episode. Let's listen in as I resume my conversation with Paul and Diana. Hey, Paul and Diane, I just want to shift gears here just a little bit and get your thoughts on the pros and cons of AI in the courts today and in the future.
So Brad, one of the things that I loved, there was this phrase that somebody came up with, and they said that they prefer to interpret AI as automate insights. And why wouldn't we want to give judges or participants or whatever the insights that could be helpful to them in either presenting their case or in figuring out the merits of a case or anything? Once again, there is a paper, a JTC paper on AI. I would strongly encourage people to read that. But the paper does a really good job of kind of breaking down the different categories of AI. It also focuses in on the concept of in the loop, under the loop, and out of the loop. And so you have these three categories of, how much human intervention, how much human interaction is there in AI? And I would pause here and I would say AI is here to stay. And what is important for courts with any technology is to look at it and say, how can we harness the power of that technology to help us do a better job? So that doesn't automatically translate into a computer wearing a black robe and doling out to judgments. But
Right.
what it does translate into is it translates into some of the things that we should be looking at, that once again, that automated insights. So whether that's, being able to automate some of that chat so that people don't have to fill out a form. How many of us love forms? How many of us do them well? Especially legal forms. I'll tell a quick funny that I love here, but when Texas turned on their e-filing system, they wanted to do a little bit of study on how things were going and all that. And what they found was that after about 3 months, that self-represented litigants were better at filling out the forms than the lawyers were. And you think about that. I mean, you can speculate on all kinds of reasons why, but why wouldn't we use technology to help us do the mundane so that we can really focus our efforts on those things that matter most, whether that's, depriving somebody of their liberty or power imbalances or things of that nature. I love the idea that AI could help us with those power imbalances. Wow, wouldn't that be amazing?
Right. To me, Brad, it's very much like the prior question we were talking about with video conferencing or other technologies that would work nicely with an online dispute resolution platform.
Right.
So, if there are AI tools that can help with language access for folks for whom English is not their primary language, or if they're what Paul was just saying about trying to help people find the information that they need, but it is a repetitive, it's a frequently asked question. Gosh, are there chatbots that could really help a lot of people with very little expense to the court so that those judicial resources could better focus on the hard cases, the important cases? To me, those are completely appropriate uses of AI in ODR.
Yeah, AI is so broad. I mean, I could apply it in so many different ways. Like, for example, the solution A2J, which allows for people to fill out forms using almost like just a step-by-step approach. So you don't
Mhm.
necessarily see this legal, the heretofores and the legal jargon. It's more Q&A back and forth. And it comes in 14 different languages, so the access to justice is quite broad. As a matter of fact, I had met with a client in Champaign County, Illinois, and was asking them, what are some of the languages that you would require if we were to implement A2J? And they're like, well, surprisingly enough, French is one of the primary languages that is used quite a bit here. And that threw a curveball to me. I didn't, I'm like, what? I mean, okay, so we're in the middle of Illinois, and you know, you don't go to an ATM and look for the French option. Let's put it that way. So, but yeah, I was fascinated by that, and certainly it gets to a point where I think any technology that makes ease of use. I really found that the individuals from Arizona University that were in one of your sessions hit the point where ease of use and allowing people to sign up easily and get started easily was essential. Otherwise, you lose people.
Yeah.
Um, and I
Exactly.
guess
So
and I guess go ahead, Paul.
Well, so I one of the people I admire in the ODR world who is just an amazing gentleman is Richard Susskind. He's out of the UK, but he did speak at one of our conferences, and he's just amazing. But he talks quite a bit about online courts and what do people want out of them. But one of the things that he sent around just recently is that in the mid 70s there was a book on AI, and the author, AI pioneer John McCarthy, was asked one time, what do judges know that we cannot tell a computer? And McCarthy replied, nothing. And now that may drive some controversy. I'm sure that it may make some people bristle and say, whoa, wait a minute, what about compassion, what about these things? And that's what we need judges and people to do, is take the knowledge that can be stored in a computer and use that in a compassionate way, in a thoughtful way, to be able to render decisions. And so ultimately, it's us harnessing that power that is really going to carry us forward, and quite frankly, help us get to the 80% of the people who have an unmet legal need. I mean, if we're really only, you know, hearing 20% of the issues, wouldn't we want technology and other methods to bring in more people into, this theoretically safe place called the courts, where people can, where justice is blind and all of that. And so, I know that there are so many issues with AI. Don't even get me started. I can tell you all kinds of ways that AI has gone haywire, some funny, some not so, but that doesn't mean that we should just say, oh, that will never work, because, we have plenty of people who said, oh, the internet, that'll never work, and look at where we are now.
And just to put a really fine point on it, Paul, I think what the National Center for State Courts would advocate is the use of these automated insight tools or augmented intelligence tools, not to be robot judges, but to support access, communication, help people understand what a realistic outcome might be given their situation, help
Right.
people identify legal issues, help people like Brad, like you were saying, help people navigate the crazy legalese and prepare the documents properly with step-by-step questionnaires. That's the kind of AI we're talking about. We're not talking about robot judges.
Which I think is outstanding, and that's why I was saying AI could be applied to so many different things depending on how you want to do it. I remember back in the day when, LexisNexis and Westlaw were coming out with natural language searches versus using Boolean logic. And
Right? That was
so,
huge.
yeah, so everyone's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, how are we guaranteeing we're getting the right answer? And so, there was kind of this comfort hurdle which you had to get over. The other thing was, for example, when we were rolling out judicial dashboards, one judge from Michigan told me, she's like, a lot of times I have an individual before me, and unfortunately, I just don't have access to all the information. And so I only can make a decision based upon what's in front of me. And so the more information, be it a judicial dashboard, which allows them to see different things from a sentencing perspective, and or the more information that is provided for a judge, they can feel comfortable that they're making the best decision they possibly can. I remember federal judges, when we were training them, they absolutely hated federal sentencing guidelines. It took the
Mm,
power it took the power out of their hands, and and they didn't have they were just stuck. So,
hmm
and whether or not that person deserved a 10-year sentence or a 5-year sentence with zero priors, unfortunately they hit the sentencing guidelines, and they were arrested with X, and they had to execute that order. And so I see the fine line between, you know, too much information and just enough information to make them better judges.
hmm Brad, I think that is one of the maybe unintended or unforeseen outcomes of online dispute resolution. Justice Himonas in Utah is so eloquent about this,
Oh, he's
reporting
great.
from his trial court judges. Those people, those parties who are not actually successful in reaching a total final settlement agreement using the ODR platform, they still have their day in court. And what Justice Simonis is telling us is that those folks coming to have their day in court are way better educated, way better prepared. They know what documents, they know what the issues are, they know to bring their evidence. And the judges are in so much of a better position because instead of trying to work their way through a cattle call of 150 cases
Yep.
in 2 hours, they've got two cases that they can really focus on. It's amazing.
Yeah, there was a
So,
video fairly recently which I observed online, and I was worried that the judges wouldn't embrace it, but they are describing, and this is totally true, the catacall experience you just described, Di, where individuals would be in a room with 100 individuals there and looking at them, and it's it already makes you uncomfortable being in a courthouse regardless. I don't care who you are. It's a setting you're not used to. It's a situation which you're nervous, and you may not want to tell the whole story, or you condense the story just because you just want to get through it. And then the judges are left with poor information. So I totally agree with you on that.
so Brad, one of the things that you and I talked about kind of in preparation for this that I wanted to bring up and is this whole idea that now ODR is only accelerating, bad outcomes, and in most cases that is a default a judgment, where creditors are just using this as a way to accelerate things and not really put much time and effort into it. And I know that Utah has been used as an example of that. And this applies to ODR, it applies to AI, it applies to really any technology. And and that is that, one of the examples I use is a stethoscope. I probably should pick a different example so I could say the word, uh, but it would be foolish for us to blame a stethoscope for finding a heart problem. That's just folly. And if ODR is identifying issues that we have in the court that are really upstream issues, whether that's that, hey, we allow for payday lenders and we allow for them to use the courts in this way and all that. And then I'm talking the we, not the courts, but we as society, shouldn't we be looking at those and saying, wow, we have, this technology has helped us identify an issue, a heart problem, and we should be embracing that. And I'm not saying, oh, we should put in ODR to find all the issues, but really we need to kind of change our dialogue about some of these things and say, you know what, we need to work on these upstream issues, not get rid of the technology and be just because somebody who would have had a default judgment in court, is now having a default judgment a little bit quicker, on an online tool. Well, I think we really need to take a look and say, would the outcomes have been any different, if that had been in court? And I can tell you in the Utah case, the answer is no, and so we need to really, really make sure that we're not blaming the stethoscope, whether that's, ODR, whether that's AI, whatever it is, for the issues that we're discovering.
Well, that's a really great analogy, Paul. I I think that on a positive note, when one of the experiences that folks are having with online dispute resolution and some of the other, virtual hearings, some of these other technologies, is that, Brad, you were just talking about the stress, that's just associated with coming into the courthouse, going through security, being in front of a judge, being surrounded by all these, strangers at the cattle call, especially for folks who have experienced some trauma. Those are those are debilitating environments for them,
Yep.
cognitively debilitating. They are not at their best in that environment. And I think some of the courts who have adopted online dispute resolution are seeing that the virtualness of it, the asynchronicity of it, the less formality of it is more conducive to helping people tell their story and collect their thoughts and their evidence in productive ways. Paul, I don't know, does that square with some of the experiences that you're hearing about across the country?
Absolutely. And Di, I'm glad that you turned this to the positives. Let's always end on a positive note. So I love the stats that have been collected on ODR. As Di mentioned, people coming to court better prepared and and judges having the time to spend with them. I've been to some of these court hearings where people went through ODR and were not successful in coming to a resolution, and so they ended up in court, but the judge was able to spend time with them and actually hear them, and those people came out going, I was heard, I had my day in court, it didn't go my way, but I had my day in court and I was heard. The stats that one of the things that we thought would happen, particularly in Utah, was that we would have a whole bunch of people who would opt out because of language barriers. Well, what we found was that, first of all, less than 2% are opting out. But second of all, that because of the asynchronous nature, those people are engaging. Now, I don't know if it's a nephew or if it's a child who's interpreting for those people, and that's for other people to research. But nonetheless, those people are able to participate in meaningful ways without interpreters, which has been very fascinating to me. I thought that would not be the case. The numbers that we're seeing after hours, where people are participating after hours, and you think about so many of the people who come to our courts, especially the self-represented litigants, don't have, I mean, they are working, sometimes two, sometimes three jobs, and they just don't have the ability to take up the time off. And so the fact that we're getting more than a third who are participating after hours and on weekends when courts, quite frankly, would not have been open anyway is exciting. And then, the people walking out of court, with a positive experience. It's just amazing. The University of Arizona did a usability study on Utah's ODR system. But what was fascinating to me was that all but one of them said they would prefer to go through the ODR system for a legal issue rather than go to court, even with all the flaws that they were identifying with the system. Usability studies always uncover plenty of warts, but they all but one said we would far prefer this method than any other method.
I couldn't agree with you more. And as a matter of fact, I wanted to thank you guys for your time. I mean, you guys are favorites in my book regardless, but it was so interesting to go the whole gamut of where we're at and where we should be and where we can be. And I really appreciate your guys' time.
Well, thank you, Brad. It's been a pleasure. And it's always so great to do these with Di. She's so amazing.
Well, right back at you, Paul.
I will see you soon. Cheers, guys. Take care.
Thanks again.
If you haven't already done so, download our online dispute resolution 3-part series. If you would like to learn more about the opportunities online dispute can bring to your court system, we encourage you to visit our ODR-specific website, www.resolvedisputes.com. This concludes our podcast today. Thanks and have a great day.
Thanks again for joining us on this podcast. To learn more about ImageSoft, please visit imagesoftinc.com. That's imagesoftinc.com. If you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe to Paperless Productivity, where we tackle some of the biggest paper-based pain points facing organizations today. We'll see you next time.